My name is Faith, and I am 35 years old. I have been married to my husband, Ryan, for about 2 years. Ryan is an employee at a company. I own several properties and live off the rental income from these. I don't want Ryan to know that I own real estate, so I've told him that I work as a freelance administrative support online. In fact, when I have some free time, I do data organization and input work. If I told Ryan that I own real estate, he would probably quit his job and depend on my income, so I keep it a secret to prevent that. I married him because being with him gave me a sense of security. I wasn't sociable from a young age and had difficulty getting along with my parents and siblings. Currently, I am hardly in touch with them. After graduating from high school, I immediately started working in an office, but struggled with workplace relationships and couldn't keep a job for long. After becoming a working adult, I started investing in a mutual fund heavily promoted by a senior at work and sold it upon resignation, which luckily resulted in a substantial profit. Subsequently, I was captivated by investing and increased my assets through stock investments while working. About 5 years ago, I stopped stock investing and specialized in real estate investment, quitting my job to make a living from those investments. My husband and I often ran into each other at a fast food restaurant we frequented late at night, and he started talking to me. "This burger is really delicious. Even on days when I fail at work, eating this makes me feel like I can keep going the next day." I wasn't really listening, but my husband kept talking without stopping. I'm generally not good at keeping a conversation with strangers, so I ignored him and went home right after finishing my burger. Since quitting my job, I've mostly stayed at home, and even as someone as shy as me, I began to seek contact with others. I didn't need to have specific conversations. Just seeing and hearing people gave me a sense of belonging to society, which I found comforting. Thus, my husband was an annoying presence, but every time we met at the restaurant, he would approach me. I could have changed shops if I really didn't want to meet him, but I didn't and kept going there because I didn't mind it that much. After over 2 years of this, my husband suddenly asked me out on a date. "I'll treat you to something other than a burger. How about we meet up, just the two of us, next time?" It was an unexpected invitation, and usually the conversations were one-sided, so I thought about refusing, but after being persistently asked, I eventually agreed to have a meal together. Having a meal alone with a man for the first time in years was refreshing, and I didn't know Ryan well yet. I thought that Ryan would back off after we had a meal together, but I was also excited to feel this thrill for the first time in a long time, and I enjoyed the meal. Even when we were alone, it was just like the usual burger place, with Ryan talking to himself and me just listening. While I wondered if Ryan was enjoying this, he said, "I'd like to meet again," and asked me out. Since I hadn't felt any discomfort listening to him, I agreed to meet again and parted ways. The next time we met, Ryan talked interestingly about his work stress and complaints, and I never got tired of listening. Ryan works in sales, seems to be struggling with his performance, often gets scolded by his boss, and also receives complaints from clients. He vents his frustrations to me, and since I enjoyed listening to him, I didn't feel bad. After many such dates, Ryan suddenly proposed, "Will you marry me?" Seeing his serious expression, I was surprised, but since I enjoyed my time with Ryan, I accepted. Yes, I'd love to. Ryan moved into the apartment where I lived after we got married, and we started living together. I had bought this apartment for investment purposes, but decided to live in it myself as it was well situated with many convenience stores and supermarkets around, and it was comfortable with good sunlight. If I had known I would be living with Ryan, I might have chosen a bigger place, but I never thought I would get married. Before we got married, I told Ryan that I was freelancing to make a living and that the room we live in was mine, but I kept my other real estate investments a secret. We didn't have a wedding ceremony, and I didn't inform my estranged family about the marriage. Unlike me, Ryan maintained a good relationship with his family. Therefore, a celebration was held at my in-laws' house. I usually didn't like gatherings, but I attended the celebration at my in-laws reluctantly and interacted with my parents-in-law and Ryan's siblings. Ryan's sister had been married before but returned to her parents' house with her children after getting divorced, and his brother was still single and living with his parents. Ryan's sister seemed interested in my background and asked me in detail about my current job and the company I used to work for. She also seemed curious about why I owned an apartment. While I was talking with my sister-in-law, my mother-in-law joined in and asked me a question. "Faith, you own your own home at such a young age? Did your parents buy it for you?" Thinking that it would satisfy both my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, I answered that my parents had bought it for me. Then, my mother-in-law became interested in my parents' occupation and asked, "What kind of work does your father do? Is he a president of a company or something?" "My father is a regular employee and doesn't earn enough to buy an apartment." Since telling the truth seemed likely to raise doubts, I answered vaguely to avoid suspicion. However, my sister-in-law then delved deeper into my family's financial situation. "I wonder if Faith's family is wealthy? If so, could they perhaps enlarge this house for us?" she asked, hopeful. Internally, I thought that even if my family were wealthy, I had no intention of funding a rebuild of my in-laws' house. Their home was quite small, and it amazed me that 5 people from 3 generations were living there. However, from that day on, my mother and sister-in-law mistakenly believed I came from a wealthy family and began seeking financial support. When I refused, they started asking for assistance through my husband, so I reluctantly began lending them small amounts through him. Although my husband looked apologetic, he lent money quite casually, which worried me about whether we would get it back. Ryan's job wasn't going well, and his salary gradually decreased. His basic pay was low, and since his salary was heavily commission-based, his poor performance placed him in a tough situation. However, since our household primarily relied on my income, it didn't really affect us. Recently, construction of a new high-rise apartment building started next to our apartment, so I jokingly said to my husband, "Once the new building is finished, this place might get overshadowed. Maybe we should consider moving." Ryan didn't seem to take it seriously, but I actually spoke to a real estate agent. The agent suggested considering our current home, but also recommended purchasing an attractive property for investment. The new property was a single-family home, 5 bedrooms, barrier-free, and ideal for the elderly or large families. Suddenly, I remembered what my mother and sister-in-law had mentioned at their home. However, the house was not only spacious but also luxurious, and the price was accordingly high. Since the in-laws' house was in my father-in-law's name, there was no reason to sell the land or house to buy this new one. Selling the in-laws' home wouldn't generate a significant amount of money, while renting would be affordable for my in-laws. Unfortunately, I couldn't picture them living in an upscale residence. Having the funds, I decided to purchase this property and rent it out. A real estate investment required a considerable amount of paperwork. I accidentally left the materials for the new home in the living room. Unfortunately, my husband found them, and it seems he had taken them to his parents' house. Seeing the materials, my mother and sister-in-law mistakenly thought the house was perfect for them. At the worst possible moment while I was out, the real estate agent visited and started explaining the 5-bedroom house to my husband. "Your wife is really incredible. To buy a new home at such a young age." Hearing this, my husband linked it to the moving plans I had previously mentioned and completely misunderstood that we were moving to the new house. It's true that the construction next door would block some sunlight, but I had no immediate intention to move. It seems my husband misunderstood that I was secretly planning to move us into the 5-bedroom house. In hindsight, since that day, my husband's behavior towards me changed, and he became more clingy than before. Our marriage had been one of non-interference, which I found very comfortable. We had agreed to share household chores, but my husband often avoided them due to his job, frequently leaving the burden to me. However, he suddenly started actively preparing meals and willingly taking on household tasks. I started to feel something was off. He laughed and explained his change in behavior. "I'm just making up for all the times I slacked off." His grin was a bit suspicious, but the change wasn't limited to household duties. After a while, my husband abruptly announced that he had quit his job. I felt like sales wasn't right for me, so I'm going to look for something else. "I'm a bit tired, so I'll take a short break first." Given he had been working late daily and facing reprimands from his boss, he was likely quite exhausted. With enough financial cushion for the time being, I wasn't worried about him not finding new work soon. However, there were no signs that my husband was actively looking for work. He was just idly passing the time. Concerned, I asked him, "Why don't you start looking for a job? You seem to have recovered both physically and mentally, haven't you?" Usually calm, my husband suddenly became furious. "I am searching for jobs online. I'm still not over the mental exhaustion," he snapped. Given the invisible nature of emotional recovery and his unusual anger, I thought it might be best to let him rest a bit more. Then, unusually cheerful, my husband, who typically did nothing at home, approached me with a proposal. "I'm thinking of not getting a job but making a living through investing. Faith, could you spare some money to help me start?" I thought he was joking, but he confidently showed me his smartphone. "With FX trading, I can start with a small amount of money, so lend me some, please." His smartphone screen was filled with comments from people who had succeeded in FX trading, so it seems he believed he could be one of them. I responded with disbelief. These people were just lucky. If everyone could make money this easily, no one would work hard. However, convinced of his own impending success, my husband pressed harder. "I'll be successful, I promise. Please, just lend me a little money." Considering my husband's inexperience with FX trading and the low likelihood of success, along with the fact that we hadn't seen any return from the money already lent to my mother and sister-in-law, I couldn't justify lending him money with no prospect of repayment. Reluctantly, he seemed to have started trading with his small severance pay, but he didn't inform me about the outcomes. He boasted about making a profit on the first day of trading, but after a week he stopped reporting anything. Worried that he might have blown through all his severance money, I asked him about it, and he exploded in anger. "Why should I report anything to you when you won't contribute money?" he shouted and stormed back to his room. The man I married had changed, and I began to feel that continuing to live together would be difficult. My mother and sister-in-law frequently borrowed money through him, and if I refused, they would come to our condo and create a scene. Recently, with my husband having quit his job, he joined them in yelling at me to lend them money. Considering the disturbance caused to neighbors by the commotion at the entrance, I ended up lending them a small amount of money. But when I asked for repayment, my mother-in-law retorted angrily, "For such a small amount, it shouldn't affect you, right? What a stingy daughter-in-law you are. Don't worry, Ryan will pay it back." Seeing my unemployed husband being burdened by his mother and sister with the responsibility made me furious. Moreover, with my husband now demanding money from me, I felt that serious measures had to be taken. On this day, while my husband was at his parents' house, I went to check the newly purchased 5-bedroom home with the real estate agent. There were already tenants living there. As I was talking to the agent outside, my husband and his family appeared, each carrying travel bags. I thought they were secretly going on a family trip, but I couldn't understand why they were here. The real estate agent asked my husband, "Are you bringing such big luggage for viewing?" I also asked his family, "Are you going somewhere on a trip?" My husband laughed and replied, "What are you talking about? We've come to move in." My mother-in-law, smiling pleasantly, continued, "It's a 5-bedroom house, right? Then we'll live together. Buying such a wonderful house and keeping it from us, you really are different, coming from a wealthy family." Confused, the real estate agent hurriedly explained to me, "I told your husband that we were coming to see this house today, but I wasn't informed that the whole family would be coming." Taking the agent's words, my husband chuckled and responded, "Faith didn't tell me anything." So I asked the real estate agent, "You were hiding the new place to surprise everyone, right?" My mother-in-law, unable to hide her joy, continued, "I'm so happy to think we can say goodbye to that old house." Increasingly bewildered, I saw my husband's family trying to enter the new house, and I quickly intervened, saying, "I did buy this house, but someone else is living here." Just then, the tenants who had recently moved into the new home appeared at the entrance and shook hands with the real estate agent, confirming their residence. Seeing this, the whole family of my in-laws started complaining to me. My mother-in-law's smile disappeared, and she screamed with a terrifying expression, "Weren't we all supposed to live in this house? Why are other people living here?" My sister-in-law threw her luggage on the ground as she yelled, "I heard it was a 5-bedroom house, so I thought we were all going to live together." My father-in-law couldn't hide his anger and raised his voice, "We've already sold our old home. We have nowhere to return to. What are we going to do now?" I was just confused by their anger, so I asked my husband what was going on. "Did you lie to everyone? What's going on here?" It seemed my husband understood the situation. He stood frozen with a pale face and started talking to me with a trembling voice. "I really thought we were moving into this house. Was it bought to be rented out to someone else?" The real estate agent also started to explain to me in a low voice, looking apologetic. "I had previously informed your husband about this property. Was there a mistake?" I responded with a wry smile, blaming it on my husband's misunderstanding. Once the in-laws knew the truth, they suddenly started blaming my husband. First, my mother-in-law got furious and raised her voice. "Why don't you check properly? It's always the same." My sister-in-law said with an exasperated expression, "It's all Ryan's fault that this mess happened. He should take responsibility." My father-in-law also stared at my husband in panic and asked, "Where are we supposed to live now?" While my husband was unable to respond, the whole family of my in-laws started making a fuss, so I said to the real estate agent, "Please find them a house, and please look for a new place for me as well. A 1-room apartment for living alone would be fine." Hearing my words, my husband rushed over to me, visibly angry. "What do you mean by living alone? What about me?" I answered calmly, "You should live with your family. Also, please pay back the money you borrowed for your mom and your sister. I'll send the divorce papers later, so let me know your new address when it's settled." Leaving the in-laws clinging to the real estate agent, I returned to my apartment. Later, my divorce with Ryan was finalized, but his mother and the others showed no intention of returning the borrowed money. Eventually, I decided to proceed with legal actions through a lawyer to enforce repayment. Whenever I lent money to Ryan's family, even if it was a small amount, I always made sure they signed a promissory note. They gathered money from relatives and even risky lenders to finally pay back the full amount. Ryan's family rented a small house and started a new life, but his father had already retired, and Ryan still hadn't found a job. Their household was supported solely by Ryan's brother's income, struggling to maintain a family of 6 under severe financial strain. They were in such dire straits that they borrowed from dangerous people, and I heard rumors of debt collectors visiting them. Additionally, they struggled to pay for new furniture they had purchased for their home, while Ryan struggled to find a job. Meanwhile, after moving to a sunny apartment, I started enjoying a comfortable life again. Since separating from Ryan, I have often returned to the fast food restaurant at night, where I can truly relax. Occasionally, I meet new people, but now I take the time to get to know people properly and try to avoid acting solely on emotion.
Are you satisfied with your life, commoner? What are you talking about? I'm worried about you. It had been 3 days since my husband and in-laws had disappeared. Out of the blue, I received a call from my mother-in-law. When I returned from my family's memorial service, I found my home empty except for my own belongings. They had secretly moved out. Worried? You're making a living with part-time jobs, right? Did my husband tell you that? Yes, I wonder why he got married to you. My child just became an executive. With these words, the whole truth became clear. My husband had lied to his parents. He had struggled with the economic differences we had and had asked me to keep his salary a secret from his parents. It felt like a betrayal. For whom did he think I was keeping it a secret? Oh, you have no idea. What do you mean? It just sounds like an excuse to me. It was not an excuse. In fact, it was my husband who was working part-time and I was the one serving as an executive. Our life had been supported by my income as an executive. BTW, if you wish to live with us, would you be willing to bear the living expenses? If so, I will let you live with us. Are you being serious right now? Yes, I am serious. You just need to promise to pay for living expenses and in exchange I'll give you our address. I had never considered living with them, so I decided to fight back. I refuse. In fact, it's my husband who has been working part-time. I've endured it until now, but I've decided to get a divorce. Stop joking. Have you gone mad? My mother-in-law laughed loudly over the phone. You'll find out very soon who is right. Why don't you check with my husband? You are a very unpleasant daughter-in-law. I thought about helping you, but I've changed my mind. I actually prefer that. My mother-in-law retorted angrily and hung up. 10 minutes later, I received a call from my husband, likely bombarded with questions from his mother. Of course, I ignored it and even blocked his number. He must be panicking now. I decided to enjoy my freedom from now on. As a result, my husband and his family would face difficulties. My name is Jenny. I serve as an executive in the company left by my deceased father. I have 2 brothers, each holding the positions of president and vice president. I originally had a different job. During that time, I met my future husband, Nick. We met at a drinking party my friend invited me to. What do you do for a living, Jenny? Oh, I'm just an office worker. And you, Nick? I work in marketing. Marketing. I admire that, since I'm no good when it comes to conversations. Is that so? Looking back, Nick might have already had a tendency to exaggerate stories. At that time, I believed he was truly working in marketing. The conversation was so pleasant that we decided to exchange contacts. We regularly went for dates, and the comfortable feeling we had when we were together eventually led us to marriage. I think it's time I introduce you to my parents. Yes, the sooner, the better. How about next Sunday? That's fine. According to Nick, his parents would welcome me warmly. However, the reception at his parents' house was entirely different from what I expected, especially the cold treatment from my mother-in-law. Jenny, you work in an office, right? Yes, that's right, but... And how much do you earn specifically? When this question was asked, I deeply pondered the meaning behind it. How much? I inquired back. You're so oblivious. It's clear I'm asking about your salary. My mother-in-law replied with slight irritation. From this exchange, the intention behind the question was clear enough. What I really wanted to know was why my mother-in-law was so interested in my financial situation. My mother-in-law's question conveyed blatant disdain towards me. In such moments, I dearly wished my husband would somehow defend me. However, he sat silently, as if he didn't feel a thing. Even a word of defense from him would have been appreciated, but he remained silent. Let's not talk like that. Money issues will resolve over time. My father-in-law tried to calm the situation, but my mother-in-law countered, such matters should be clarified early on. My in-laws continued to argue fiercely in front of me, ignoring my presence. Sitting there, I questioned how to perceive this situation and what was being shown to me, almost losing sight of my original purpose for visiting. Eventually, my mother-in-law somehow agreed with my father-in-law's opinion, and the situation finally calmed down. On the way back home, "Why didn't you say anything back there?" I pressed my husband. "What do you mean?" He responded, surprised. "Don't give me the what do you mean? Why did you keep quiet?" I pursued further. My husband didn't seem to understand at all what I was talking about. I sighed involuntarily at his lack of response, overwhelmed by a serious anxiety about whether we could continue to function well as a couple. "Sorry, I just get nervous in front of my parents," he said. His expression was filled with a childlike sadness, as if he had been scolded. Faced with such an expression, I felt as though pursuing the matter further was somehow wrong. Eventually, we went through with our marriage registration a few days later and officially became husband and wife. After that, we barely had any contact with my in-laws and lived peaceful days. "I have something important to tell you next time you come home," my brother unexpectedly called one day. "That's fine, but what's it about?" "It's a bit hard to talk about over the phone." "Really? Okay. I'll come home soon." I found myself heading back to my family home after a long time. My mother and brothers were living together there. "I'm home. We've been waiting. Sorry to rush you, but could you have a seat?" "Yes, that's fine." Sitting across from my brothers, I could sense a tense atmosphere in the air. Unable to bear it, I asked my brother, "So, what's this important thing you wanted to talk about?" "As you know, we've been carrying on father's business." "Yes, I'm aware of that. So, we would like to welcome you as an executive in the company." "What? Why all of a sudden?" My younger brother began to explain. "You've always had a talent for judging people's character." "Wait, since when?" "Recently, someone we trusted ran off with our money." "What? Really?" "The person who took the money was an acquaintance from the time our father was alive. He used to serve as an executive, and so a position has just opened up." I found it hard to accept the proposal so suddenly. "I can't give you an answer right now." Then, my mother also spoke up. "Jenny, I know it's tough for you, but could you help us out?" "Mom, are you feeling okay?" My mother had been frail for a year now, spending most of her time resting. "I'm feeling well today, so no worries." "Is the executive position really out of the question?" "It's all so sudden. Let me think about it." I left my family home that day without giving a clear answer, troubled about how to respond to my mother's request. Upon returning home, I discussed the matter with my husband. "Really? That's fantastic. You should definitely take it." He was surprisingly enthusiastic. "Do you really think so? After all, it could mean a better salary than what you're making now, right?" They didn't go into details. I fully support my brother-in-law's proposal. There was a specific reason behind my husband's fervent support. A week after discussing this with my husband, an urgent call came. "Please come back home quickly." "What happened?" "It's Mom." Upon receiving the news, I rushed out of work and headed to my family home. When I arrived, many people were already gathered there. In the center of them all, my mother laid quietly. "Please tell me this is a dream." I was unprepared for the sudden turn of events. It was unexpected. According to my eldest brother, when they went to check on her in the morning, she was already dead. I didn't have the courage to look at my mother's face directly. All I could do was stand there, stunned. "Jenny, where's Nick?" I haven't called him yet. I'll do it right now." But my husband didn't answer the phone at all. In the end, all I could do was leave a message on the answering machine. About 2 hours later, my husband arrived. "Sorry for being late. I was busy." Rather than sorrow, I felt angered by his attitude. How can you laugh? Mom has passed away. I didn't mean it like that. Whatever, just keep quiet. You're worrying too much. Until everything was over, my husband did not grasp the seriousness of the situation. While we were busy attending to the many visitors, it became late at night before we could even realize. Just when I was sinking into the sofa, exhausted, my husband made an unbelievable remark. With a smile on his face, he brought up the topic of dividing the inheritance. What about inheritance? Will you get something distributed? I can't answer that so suddenly. But your father was managing a company, right? There must be a considerable amount to expect. Stop it. It's unbelievable to talk about such things at this time. But this is an important discussion. If you're going to talk only about money, I don't mind if you leave. Okay, fine, I understand. With those words, Nick left the house. I could not comprehend why he was so insistent on bringing up the inheritance. Soon after, my eldest brother came by. Did something happen? It's nothing important. It must be tough for you. I never thought I'd be discussing inheritance or company matters at such a time. Normally, you wouldn't discuss such things. Besides, when you guys proposed to me to join the company, my husband was unusually eager. There might be some ulterior motive for his obsession with money. You might be right. I couldn't help but wonder why he acted so forcefully. After my brothers assured me there was no need to worry about my mother, I immediately prepared to return home. I tried contacting my husband before leaving, but he didn't respond at all. As a result, I decided to call his parents' house. Jenny, I've heard from Nick about the situation. I'm truly sorry to hear about your mother's passing. Did you hear anything else? Yes, I heard. According to Nick, you're trying to resolve the inheritance issue on your own. That's not true. In fact, such discussions have not happened at all. Really? Are you hiding something? It seemed like my words were not getting through. Anyway, now is not the time to have such discussions. How insolent. I'll take that as a compliment. Eventually, my mother-in-law could not stand it anymore and ended the call. She seemed furious. However, it was a trivial matter to me. I returned home, but my husband did not come back that day. He returned the following day. Where were you yesterday? Does it matter? I guess not. Our relationship had clearly cooled. Over the next week, there was hardly any meaningful conversation between us. My brothers took care of the funeral arrangements for our mother. Even after the funeral, I never saw my husband or his parents visit us. During this time, I made an important decision. I've decided to work for the company run by you guys. Is that okay? You can reconsider. Last time, we rushed and didn't fully listen to your opinion. Thank you, but I've made up my mind. It's okay. With that decision, I started a new career at my brother's company. I hesitated whether to inform my husband about this decision, but considering it would be more troublesome if he found out later, I decided to be honest. I'm going to be busy as an executive from now on. Really, work hard for me too. Of course, that's the plan. And so, I quit my previous job and threw myself into the business with my brothers. Every day at the new job was tough and exhausting, but it was also fulfilling. Half a year later, my husband unexpectedly said, "I quit my job." Why would you do that? Well, the previous job wasn't a good fit for me. But you were in marketing, right? Marketing? No, I was working in a factory. What? I was astonished by my husband's revelation. All this time, I had believed he was working in marketing. This meant he had been lying about his job since we met. So, you've been deceiving me all this time. Deceiving? What are you talking about? If you've forgotten, then it's fine. What on earth are you saying? That was exactly what I wanted to know. Regretting my marriage with him at this point was futile. So, what do you plan to do now? You're unemployed, right? I have you, don't I? You're an executive with a considerable income, right? At that moment, I finally understood everything. He probably thought working was foolish now that he had me. So, what you were aiming for was my income. Don't talk like I did something wrong, but it's better to keep the executive thing a secret from my parents. That's true. And I've decided to start sending money to my parents every month starting next month. I'd like you to handle that. Wait a minute. I haven't heard anything about this. I just decided it now. Indeed, it would be troublesome if my in-laws found out. However, I couldn't just accept it as is. But it would be equally troublesome if they found out you're unemployed, right? So you will have to work at least the bare minimum. What are you talking about? It's a deal to keep each other's secrets safe. This should put your mind at ease. Yeah, that makes sense. Then it's decided. All right, I really can't worry my parents, so please. With a sense of defeat, Nick lowered his head. I had no intention of continuing life under these circumstances. Afterward, Nick started working part-time according to my instructions. However, the wage he earned was extremely low. His working hours weren't all day, and he lived a life as free as during his student days. Even worse, he spent the money he earned on gambling such as poker and slot machines. You should go out sometimes. You can't always be at home. There's no problem, right? Let me be free. Gradually, Nick seemed to have forgotten even the promise to keep each other's secrets. From this point on, Nick's behavior got more and more unbearable. Despite being a part-timer, he started coming home late and going out more frequently. You've been coming home late recently. Is something going on? Oh, I've been asked to do overtime at work. But didn't you choose a job with no overtime? That was the plan, but it seems the situation has changed. Then why have you started to go out more on your days off? I thought I should get some exercise outside once in a while. You dress up quite a bit for that, don't you? I kept asking questions out of curiosity. Initially calm, Nick seemed troubled by my barrage of questions. How am I supposed to answer when you ask so many questions at once? Give me a break. I don't think I'm asking anything too difficult. Are you looking down on me because you're an executive? What? How did we get to that topic? If you want to mock me, go ahead. Wait, where are you going? Stop it. Leave me alone. With that, Nick left the house. Why is he so self-centered? In the end, he didn't return until morning the next day, and when he did come back, he went straight to bed without saying a word. Since it was time to go to work, I left the house. Upon arriving at the company, my eldest brother approached me. What's with that look? Just a lot going on. Is it related to your husband? Yeah, kind of. Do explain. My second brother also joined, and we all sat down to talk about the recent events. I can't believe you've put up with that situation for so long. I would have divorced in a week. I know it's not okay to continue like this. Is there something on your mind? Just a little. Well, my doubts and worries about my husband's behavior grew. I also strongly wished for him to return to the man he was before we got married. That's why I couldn't bring myself to be cold to him. But I soon realized that such lenient thinking was a mistake. It might be best to do something about it soon. Yes, definitely. My suggestion is, there must be a reason behind such behavior. We should look into that. Thank you. I'll do that. Following my brother's advice, I decided to investigate Nick's activities. I had no idea what he was doing during work hours. With the help of my second brother, I prepared to install small cameras. Be careful. If you get caught, it's over. Choose the placement wisely. Got it? I really appreciate this. You can check the recorded footage from your smartphone anytime. That's great. I'm not good with technical stuff, so this helps a lot. While Nick was out, I installed cameras in the living room, bedroom, and other areas. Anxious about the content of the footage, I couldn't sleep at night when I unexpectedly received a call from my mother-in-law. Jenny, have you quit your job? No, I haven't quit my job. Is that so? I heard from Nick that you had. No, I'm still working. Well, it doesn't matter to me either way, but you should be thankful to Nick. Wait a minute, please. I felt infuriated at the inaccurate information conveyed to my mother-in-law. Nick returned home with a smile, unaware of anything. I won big at the casino today. Here, this is a gift for you. What's this? It's a gift. He handed me several prizes. However, such things didn't mean anything to me. I got a call from your mother earlier. Why did she think I quit my job? From my mom? What did she say? Why did you make it seem like I quit my job? Oh, that. Well, and she said I should be thankful to you. Don't say unnecessary things from now on. Got it? I'll be careful. If something like this happens again, you do understand what will happen, right? I get it. So stop threatening me like that. It depends on what you do. After that, Nick's behavior temporarily became more settled. He started to take his work seriously, and the frequency of his outings noticeably decreased. During this time, I had to return to my hometown. I'll be going back home for a bit. I plan to return in 2 days. Understood? Have fun. It's not for fun. It's not a leisure trip. Well, don't be so stiff about it. Isn't it time for you to leave? All right, I'm leaving this place in your hands then. He seemed oddly pleased about me leaving. However, my mind was focused on my mother's first-year memorial. Upon arriving at my family home, my brothers warmly welcomed me. Thanks for coming. Of course, I came because it's Mom's first-year memorial. I see. But what about the camera situation? Camera? Don't tell me you forgot about the high-performance camera I prepared. It was meant to monitor your husband, no? Oh, you're right. I can't believe you forgot. Well, a lot has been going on, and I completely forgot. With the day-to-day business and issues with my mother-in-law, I had completely forgotten about the surveillance cameras. I'll check it when I get back home. Can't you look at it from your phone? That's right. Oh dear. As suggested, I used my smartphone to review the previous footage. The screen showed my husband preparing to go out about a week ago. I see. Did you find out something? Yes, it's quite obvious. Can you show us? I showed my brothers the footage recorded by the camera. The footage included clear audio of my husband arranging to meet someone on the phone and whispering words of love. It was undeniable evidence of infidelity. This is solid proof, definitely evidence of cheating. Feeling utterly disrespected, a wave of emotions surged beyond just anger. What a pathetic man. I can't believe even you misjudged your husband. I glared at my eldest brother. Don't look at me so sharply. I was just joking. After my mother's first-year memorial was over, I hurried back home. I tried contacting my husband, but there was no response. Upon returning home, the sight that greeted me was unbelievable. Everything except my belongings had been taken away. I also tried contacting my in-laws, but there was no response from their side either. The only thing left was the camera I had installed. I immediately checked the recorded footage. It showed my husband and my in-laws talking, and their conversation was clearly audible. This should be enough. I wonder how she'll react when she comes back. Let's go. We have no more business here. Yes, let's. Hearing these conversations, I realized there was a larger scheme at play. Filled with anxiety, I headed to my in-laws' house, which was about a 40-minute train ride away. Facing the reality of my in-laws' house now being a plot for sale forced me to confront the situation head-on. As I stood there, a neighbor approached me. If you're looking for the family that lived there, they moved out a few days ago. Do you know where they went? I'm not sure, but they were quite pleased, saying they'd be living with their talented son. I appreciate the information, thank you. From that moment, I resolved to get revenge. Upon returning home, I tried to figure out a plan, but finding their whereabouts and establishing contact proved difficult. 3 days after my husband and in-laws vanished, I received an unexpected call from my mother-in-law. Are you satisfied with your life, commoner? What? What are you talking about? I'm worried about you. All of a sudden, I received a call from my mother-in-law. Worried? You're making a living with part-time jobs, right? Did my husband tell you that? Yes, I wonder why he got married to you. My child just became an executive. With these words, the whole truth became clear. My husband had lied to his parents. He had struggled with the economic differences we had and had asked me to keep his salary a secret from his parents. I felt betrayed. For whom did he think I was keeping it a secret? You have no idea. What are you talking about? It just sounds like an excuse to me. Do you really think everything Nick says is correct? Is it so wrong to trust my own son? In fact, it was my husband who was working part-time and I was the one serving as an executive. Our life had been supported by my income as an executive. BTW, if you wish to live with us, would you be willing to bear the living expenses? If so, I will let you live with us. Are you being serious right now? Yes, I am serious. You just need to promise to pay for living expenses, and in exchange, I'll give you our address. I had never considered living with them, so I decided to fight back. I refuse. In fact, it's my husband who has been working part-time. I've endured it until now, but I've decided to get a divorce. Stop joking. Have you gone mad? My mother-in-law laughed loudly over the phone. You'll find out very soon who is right. Why don't you check with my husband? You are a very unpleasant daughter-in-law. I thought about helping you, but I've changed my mind. I would actually prefer that. My mother-in-law retorted angrily and hung up. Shortly afterward, I received a call from my husband, likely bombarded with questions from his mother. Of course, I ignored him and even blocked his number. I decided to enjoy my freedom from now on, which would surely put my husband and his family in a difficult situation. The next day, I resolved to move out. Even if they visited, I would no longer be there. It was only fair to return the treatment I had received. After discussing the situation with my two brothers, we immediately headed to a local real estate agency. I sought a new place to live as quickly as possible. We have a property available for immediate move-in, but the rent is somewhat high, the agent said. That's fine. I'll take that property. Understood. Let's proceed with the paperwork. I completed the contract that day and contacted a moving company. Luckily, only my belongings needed to be moved, so the relocation was swift. In my new home, I immediately felt relaxed. I hadn't realized how comfortable it could be to live alone. About 2 weeks later, I noticed many missed calls from my mother-in-law on my phone. Having already blocked my husband, any contact would have to come from her. Despite feeling annoyed, I decided to answer. However, it wasn't my mother-in-law on the other end. Where are you? I can't get into the house. Didn't I tell you? I moved out. You moved out. Why? You started it. I just did the same. Wait a minute. What about our lives from now on? It all began with your lies. That's none of my concern. That's Also, I intend for us to part ways. I'll send the divorce papers by mail, so could you give me your address? Nick then started laughing. I see, so you don't know our address, huh? Then divorce is impossible, right? Realizing his tactic, I understood. However, I'm not one to give up so easily. It's true I don't know the address, but I won't give up over that. A little investigation will solve that. Wait, wouldn't it be strange for you and me to part ways? What's so strange about that? Just tell your mother the truth and clear things up. All right, I'll talk to her properly. I can't trust your words. Goodbye. After ending the call, I immediately went to a lawyer. My eldest brother had recommended a consultation with our business's legal advisor. I explained the situation in detail, including the recorded footage and everything that had led up to this point, and they were happy to take on the case. They started arranging for the divorce proceedings right away. A few days later, I left a voicemail message for my mother-in-law. A week later, Nick and his parents showed up at the agreed place. Let's keep this brief, since you've made us come all the way here. Of course, that was the plan. Hiring a lawyer, are we? How desperate must you be? My mother-in-law laughed, but Nick's complexion had gone pale. In fact, he had not yet told his parents the whole truth. This situation was to my advantage. The conversation quickly moved to the main issue. First, based on Nick's infidelity, I demanded divorce and compensation. What are you talking about? Please, take a look at this. I presented the recorded footage. This is the evidence. Do you have any objections? Nick fell silent. Nick, what is all this? Explain yourself. Well, actually, this isn't the only thing. I then presented documents related to the claim for compensation. The documents detailed unpaid living expenses, lack of cooperation in household chores, providing false information to his parents, and the emotional damage done to me. What is this? This is all lies. Isn't this a bit too harsh? Even my father-in-law, who had been hesitant for a while, finally broke his silence. To tell the truth, I wasn't much interested in my father-in-law's opinion, but if there was going to be a confrontation, I wouldn't hold back. If you're going to insist, then take a look at this. I presented my business card to Nick's parents. What's this? Let me see that closely. They were engrossed in the business card. It had my name and position listed on it. This is the reality, the truth that Nick has been hiding all along. What about the part-time job? That was Nick's doing. In reality, I've been supporting our household. Nick has been squandering his earnings on gambling. Hearing this, Nick's parents' anger turned towards him. So, the entire livelihood has been. Correct. I've been supporting it. Nick, what does this mean? Were we wrong? It's too late for that. Why did you do this? Truly disgraceful. I just didn't want to worry you two. The situation was enveloped in an atmosphere that seemed like a family argument was about to start. It was a family problem that seemed impossible to resolve. Could you please take your family arguments elsewhere? I don't have the luxury to deal with this. To this, my in-laws changed their attitude and showed an apologetic stance. Jenny, please forgive us. The truth is, we're victims too. My wife's right. It's not like we ever hated you, Jenny. Even if you say so, my feelings won't change. The apologies at this point felt pitiful. Looking at Nick, he was hanging his head, unable to speak. Anyways, can you please sign this for me? Huh? I want to end this situation quickly. You don't have the right to refuse. Understood. Nick signed the divorce papers with tears in his eyes. After checking the signature, I left the place. Goodbye. As I walked away, I could hear the arguments of Nick and his parents spilling outside. What lies ahead is uncertain, but a stable life will be difficult for them. Their life was sustainable only because of my support. Such a foolish family. Later, I submitted the divorce papers through my legal representative. I was finally free. Is the divorce finalized? You've heard? That was quick. Well, he's the company's legal advisor. Still, this should lift the burden. Now you can focus on your work, is what my eldest brother said, but according to my younger brother, he was pretty worried about me. It seems my eldest brother was worried about me in his own way. I heard about my ex-husband's current situation through the liar. As expected, Nick's mistress, upon learning the truth, disappeared as well. Of course, it didn't end there. I received a proper goodbye payment in the form of compensation. Later, my mother-in-law contacted me. There's something I'd like to discuss, if you don't mind. There could only be one thing she desired in this situation. You're in need of money, aren't you? We can't go on like this. It was all Nick's fault. No, 3 adults should be able to manage somehow. Even after all this pleading, you still won't help us. There's no reason for me to help. You deserve to be unhappy. That's exactly what I'd like to say to you. Goodbye. Currently, I hear that my in-laws are living in poverty together. This is because they were completely dependent on Nick for their living expenses, whereas the actual financial support was coming from me. Now, I enjoy a life free from anyone's constraints. Work is going well, and my days are fulfilling. Today, under the clear sky, I embark on a new day.
We're moving into your parents' house. They've moved to the countryside, right? So that mansion is ours now. What are you talking about? My name is Jill. I'm approaching my 30s. I have a good relationship with Jeff, whom I married a few years ago, and my in-laws who live nearby are very kind people. I get along well with my biological parents and lead a peaceful life. At some point, my parents, who had lived in New York for a long time, decided to retire in a remote part of the countryside. The city is indeed too noisy. It's inconvenient, but the countryside life suits us better. Although we lived in the city because of my father's job, my parents were raised in the countryside. If they wish to return to the countryside, I have no reason to object. The house they once lived in the city will remain vacant for a while. So I decided to take over the management occasionally and sent my parents off to the countryside, but this led to an unexpected problem. It happened a few months after my parents started their life in the countryside. After dinner one evening, I was talking with Jeff while looking at the photos sent by my parents. So they both seemed to be really into their vegetable garden and enjoying their life in the countryside. Wow, they like the countryside. I'm surprised because I thought they liked living in the city. They were originally raised in the countryside. Hey Jeff, have you ever thought about living in the countryside in the future? I casually asked Jeff about our future. Jeff was halfway through listening to my story when he suddenly stood up. Surprised by his urgency, he took out his smartphone and began to make a call. Dad, Mom, our plan might work. Let's do as planned tomorrow. What? Jeff, what happened? I can't wait any longer. First, we have to bring over my parents' stuff. Leaving those words behind, Jeff hurried to the entrance and rushed out. I heard the car, so he must have gone somewhere far. I had no idea what was going on. Moreover, there was only one car at home, so I had no way to follow Jeff. I had no choice but to wait vaguely for his return. That night, I waited alone for Jeff until late. He didn't answer his smartphone, and he didn't reply to my emails either. Eventually, I decided to go to sleep alone. However, the next morning, an unexpected turn of events awaited. Hey Jill, wake up. We have to pack quickly. Jeff, you're back? Also, where have you been? What do you mean by packing? I asked him, confused as I had just woken up. He answered excitedly. We're moving into your parents' house. They've already moved to the countryside, right? So that mansion is ours now. What are you talking about? Come on, hurry up. Let's start with my stuff. You start packing too. My parents will come to help us soon. Rubbing my eyes, I managed to understand that Jeff wanted to move. Judging by the keywords like countryside and mansion, it seems he is aiming for the residence where my parents once lived. Normally, I would avoid discussing this with others, but my childhood home, my parents' old house, is a luxurious mansion worth $1 million. Before I could respond to this realization, Jeff grabbed his luggage and hurriedly left the house. Within a few minutes, my in-laws arrived at our house. Jill, have you finished packing yet? Well, I suppose you won't need much of your stuff. That's right. Since she's going to live with as a daughter-in-law, she wouldn't need much. 2 sets of summer clothes and 2 sets of winter clothes should be enough, right? Dispose of everything else and come. The room in the shoe area right next to the entrance will be enough for you, right? Make sure to bring minimal belongings. Come on, how long are you going to daze around? Why don't you hurry up and come to the new house? Our stuff was already brought over yesterday. My in-laws, who had been kind until then, began saying strange things. What are you talking about? When I asked in a lowered voice due to their sudden rude remarks, they replied, "We mean exactly what we said. From today, you are working in our house as a maid. Of course, do continue working outside as usual, but we'll manage your salary, so be prepared for that. Why? Both of you, what has happened? You have been so kind until now. I still tried to hope this was a nightmare. No, I wanted to believe it was a nightmare. But as if to shatter that hope, they declared, "We were kind to you because we were after your wealth. We were considerate because your parents are wealthy. It's been tiring to pretend all these times, but now we can drop the act altogether." That's right. Your parents aren't planning to come back from the countryside, are they? Then you should serve us from now on. The reason they had been kind to me was due to my family's wealth. Indeed, honestly, my family is financially better off than an average household. But to think that my in-laws saw us in such a way. Ah, Jill, have you finally woken up? And you haven't packed yet? Well, never mind, we didn't plan to take your stuff anyway. Anyway, can you help us unpack at the new house? Although I was still dazed due to the shock, Jeff spoke to me in the same way. I understood then that Jeff was also after my wealth, just like his parents. However, there were 3 of them, and resistance was impossible. I was put in the car and taken away to my parents' residence. The biggest room is mine, as I am the master of the house. Jill, don't enter it unless you're cleaning. I'll take the hobby room for myself. It has plenty of bookshelves, and I've always been envious of it. Then, I guess I'll use the room that used to be the study. Studying is a man's dream after all. My parents' house was in disarray, and it bore no resemblance to its former self. When Jeff left the previous day, he must have taken the keys to this house without permission. And during the night, my in-laws must have secretly moved in their belongings. The interiors my parents loved were all pushed to the corners, and the house was filled with items my in-laws and Jeff preferred. This curtain is in poor taste, but maybe we could sell it for some money. These foreign magazines might be valuable too, right? Let's sell them and have a lavish barbecue party. They laughed joyously as they trashed the house. Stop doing whatever you want. This isn't Jeff's house, nor is it your house, right? Even as I tried to stop them, they didn't listen. Quiet. If no one's using it, it's no problem if we take over it. That's right, I've always dreamt of living in a large city mansion. Anyway, can you mop the whole house? The robot vacuum is fine, but a mop suits you better, Jill. Watching the house I grew up in being destroyed, I felt a deep despair. Why is it being destroyed so carelessly? Still, I cannot give up here. My parents have moved to the countryside, but I must protect this house. Do you really think it's okay to do as you please like this? Huh? Why are you acting so high and mighty? This house is mine now. I can do whatever I want in my own house. When I confronted Jeff, he acted as if he owned the place. I'm truly shocked. You all don't understand anything. Completely fed up, I decided that showing evidence would be more effective than arguing. I took out my smartphone and contacted someone. What are you doing? Don't tell me you're asking for help from your parents in the countryside. That's pointless. By the time they come from the countryside, this house will already be ours. From now on, we will change this house into ours completely, so there's no turning back. They seemed to think I was trying to say something to my parents, but I left their misunderstanding unaddressed. There was no need for me to correct them. After all, the truth would soon come to light. And as I expected, everything was resolved in 10 minutes. Jill, sorry to keep you waiting. Nick. Sorry for calling you out of the blue. No need to apologize. Nick? What are you doing here? Seeing that I had called my brother Nick, Jeff turned pale. Nick then looked sternly at Jeff. Jeff, what is this all about? Can you explain? Well, you see. The moment Nick arrived, Jeff's face turned ashen. And there was a good reason for that. Nick was, in fact, a benefactor to Jeff. A few years ago, during an economic downturn, Jeff had lost his job. He had no particular qualifications and had a hard time finding a new workplace. At that time, Nick helped him and gave him an opportunity to work at his company. Frankly, he's not the type I'd hire if he weren't your husband, Jill. But for the sake of my beloved sister, I want him to work hard. Nick, I appreciate this. I will never forget this favor. Given these circumstances, Jeff was in no position to defy him. Pale-faced, he struggled to find an excuse. Jill's room is the room in the shoe storage area, and you're selling our parents' decorative items? What are you talking about? But an empty house deteriorates fast. I thought it would be better if we live here and manage it. Even so, why would Jill's room be the one in the shoe storage area? And having your parents manage her salary is clearly abnormal, isn't it? That is. Jeff continued to desperately make excuses, but Nick would not accept them. Despite Jeff's attempts to escape the situation, Nick spoke calmly. First of all, what do you mean by living in my house without permission? No, Nick, that's not it. I meant I was going to live in your parents' house. I checked with Jill, but it seems you really don't understand. This house was only borrowed by our parents from me. It's officially under my name, and it's my house. Jeff was shocked by Nick's words. However, by now, Nick and I were beyond exasperated. Because, after all, it was an obvious fact. When Jeff was laid off, it wasn't just him who was saved by Nick. Around the same time Jeff was dismissed, my father's company was also facing a financial crisis. At that time, my father was preparing to sell all his assets to clear his debts, but Nick stepped in to help. If you sell the house, Dad, we would lose our home too. So don't worry, I'll buy it under proper terms, and you two won't have to struggle with your living conditions. Since then, my parents had been living with assistance from Nick. The reason they moved to the countryside was not just because they liked it there. They also didn't want to burden Nick any further. You vandalize my house and treat my sister terribly. You're not only incompetent at work, but also have a terrible personality. I see no reason to keep employing someone like you. What? No. Nick, are you serious? Do you think I'm not serious? As Nick declared him fired, Jeff started to panic. Then he turned to me and threw out these words. But if I lose my job, Jill will be in trouble. We are married, after all. However, Jeff's statement was out of place. I no longer wanted to trouble my brother, and I made my position clear. What are you talking about? Considering what you've done to me, divorce is obvious, isn't it? So even if you lose your job now, it has nothing to do with me. Honestly, I think it serves you right. Don't say such things. It will be tough for my parents too. Hearing Jeff's words, my in-laws, who had been silent until then, also spoke up. That's right. Jill is kind-hearted. She wouldn't do such a thing. We had a good relationship, didn't we? Did you forget what you said to me this morning? Do you really think I would worry about your future now? That's impossible. At that moment, Jeff and my in-laws realized that my brother and I were not going to give in. Eventually, they followed my brother's orders and removed their belongings from our family home. Later, the family lawyer, whom my brother had contacted, was present as we discussed the divorce. Look, I'm going to be unable to work soon, so transfer all the property to me. Jill loves me, so she will surely allow it, right? We also rely on Jeff's income. Jill, please help us. Jill, have mercy on us. They were desperate to get their hands on the property. However, I had no intention of showing them mercy. I just checked, but you had thrown away my personal belongings without permission. That included valuable jewelry, you know. We thought it was cheeky for you to own such things, so we threw them away for you. Ah, you've admitted to throwing them away, so you'll have to compensate me. Mom, what are you doing? The discussion was completely led by us from the beginning to the end. Jeff and his parents had thrown away many of my belongings from the previous night until then. This included unopened cosmetics and valuable accessories, as well as some very expensive out-of-print books. Why do I, who have lost my job, have to suffer like this? This is terrible. As a result, Jeff relinquished most of his assets, and the divorce was finalized. But it didn't end there. My in-laws, who had claimed to be financially strained due to their pension, ended up having to pay me compensation for their harassment. Why do we have to pay even though we are on a pension? Why is a daughter-in-law acting superior to us in the first place? That's really true. We feel no respect from her. They accused me of being a cold person, but that was irrelevant. I refused their request to reduce the amount and demanded the promised compensation. After the divorce was finalized, my brother and I decided to demolish our family home and sell the land. I really want to keep this house because it's full of memories, but it would be unpleasant and troublesome if Jeff and his family come here, right? So let's sell the house. Yes, I think that's better too. This place is inconvenient for both you and me to commute from. The house was filled with many memories, and I would have liked to keep it as it was. However, the thought of Jeff and his family stepping foot there is extremely unpleasant and would also be a hassle, making it a major burden for us. We have many photos taken as a family, and these photos will forever remain vivid in our hearts. These memories will never be forgotten. But what is even more important is completely cutting ties with Jeff and his family and starting a new chapter in our lives. This allows us to embrace new happiness and a peaceful life. Afterward, I continue to work actively as before, enjoying my days. My brother is also expanding his business, leading a busier yet more fulfilling life. Additionally, my parents have passionately embarked on a new endeavor of growing different types of vegetables, planning to take on the challenge of cultivating new varieties. I heard that Jeff and his parents are facing financial and professional difficulties and have even lost their place to live. However, their situation has no impact on us now. We are now focused on saying goodbye to the memories with Jeff and his family and starting a completely new life. What we understand is that there are things far more valuable than money or the luxury of a house.
My name is Kristen, and I am currently working from home as an illustrator. Steve and I have been married for 15 years now. We have a son named Alex, who is in his second year of middle school. He has a mischievous side, and as he is going through puberty, each day feels like it slightly wears on my heart. Currently, our family is living with Steve's parents, a situation that came about at the suggestion of my in-laws. Steve has two sisters. One is married and has left home, while the other remains unemployed and mostly stays in her room. We agreed to live together following their request for support. However, this living arrangement has become a significant source of stress for me. Initially, my in-laws were kind, but over time, they began to become more demanding. When working from home, I am criticized as if I were just playing around, and when doing housework, I am told to clean more thoroughly. Without understanding my work from home situation, attempts to explain are dismissed as making excuses. As a result, I have given up on trying to convince or explain to them. I have explained the situation to my husband and asked for his intervention more than once or twice. When Steve spoke to his parents about my work, they dismissed it, saying, "It probably doesn't turn much, and it's just play, not work," and he did not argue further. It's clear I am not just playing around. I have seriously acquired clients, and while my annual income was $50,000 when we got married, it has now grown to $100,000, and I work with numerous companies. I believe Steve understood this, but his true feelings remain unclear. This situation has continued for 15 years, but I do not intend to endure it indefinitely. I have been secretly saving money, and I am close to reaching my goal. Once the goal is achieved, I plan to buy a luxurious high-rise condo and start a new life there with Steve and Alex. Steve agrees with this plan, and I am looking forward to a promising future. "Steve, we're almost at our target amount," I said to my husband, who was browsing on his phone in bed after finishing housework and work. He glanced at me and responded with a lackluster hum. His reaction disheartened me, and I lost the energy to continue the conversation, sighing deeply. "Don't you like it?" "It's not that I don't like it. I'm just wondering how to tell my parents," Steve murmured while fiddling with his phone. Indeed. We have not yet informed his parents about our plan to purchase the condo. However, I was not deeply troubled by this matter. I thought that once the condo's paperwork was advanced to a stage where cancellation was impossible, his parents would have no choice but to accept it. This turned out to be the right approach. After a few months, I managed to save the target amount and successfully acquired the high-rise condo, which is in Steve's name. Although I earn more, the uncertainty of my home-based work made us decide it was safer to have the property in his name, as he has a relatively stable job. Preparations went smoothly, and as the moving day approached, we decided to inform his parents about the move and the purchase of the condo. They were surprised when they learned about the condo but ultimately raised no objections. A few days after the discussion, we moved into the luxurious high-rise condo as planned and started our new life as a family of three for the first time since our marriage. We managed to acquire a spacious home with a 5-room layout, including a bedroom for us, a room for Alex, and a workspace for me, where I can comfortably progress my work with no issues. We were enjoying our happy times when, shortly after moving, a request came from a well-known company I contracted with asking me to visit their office. The company is quite a distance from our current high-rise condo, requiring an airplane flight to visit. Moreover, a day trip would be challenging, necessitating an overnight stay. Despite this, I was required to stay at the company for about 3 days, engaging in various meetings that necessitated illustration work. Consequently, I arranged a 4-night, 5-day schedule, shared the information with my husband, Steve, and departed for the state where the company is located a few days later. The meetings with the company concluded smoothly, and I returned to our high-rise condo the following day. Exhausted, I bought some prepared food on my way home and arrived around 6 p.m. Since it was a holiday, I expected Steve to be home. However, upon opening the front door, I discovered several unfamiliar shoes lined up, which at first made me think Alex's friends had visited. But it was clear those weren't the shoes of youngsters. Wondering if perhaps they belonged to Steve's colleagues, I quietly made my way to the living room and slowly opened the door. There, I saw my in-laws relaxing at the dining table. "Excuse me." I approached my in-laws with surprise and greeted them, to which they cheerfully responded, "Welcome back, we're happy to see you." However, I was too perplexed to reply. At that moment, Steve, who had been watching TV, came over to us, and I gave him a look that demanded an explanation. He casually mentioned that after telling his mother about my 4-night, 5-day absence, she decided to come over right away. "Leaving your son and grandson for a trip? What were you thinking? His mother reproachfully commented after Steve's explanation. No, it wasn't a trip. I hurriedly corrected her misunderstanding, but the looks on my in-laws' faces were clearly skeptical. Lies are unacceptable. Was that your purpose for leaving the house? My father-in-law raised his voice at me, and my mother-in-law joined him with a menacing look. Could it be that you're engaging in infidelity? My mother-in-law sneered, casting a contemptuous gaze and mocking words at me. I'm completely innocent of such actions. It was for work purposes. I raised my voice in defense against the baseless accusation. Your agitation is suspicious. My mother-in-law laughed, sipping her coffee and taking a deep breath. Is that really so? Steve cast a cold glance at me, seemingly taking his mother's words at face value. However, I had already thoroughly explained the situation to Steve and provided evidence to prove it, even sending him photos taken with colleagues at the business trip. Yet, I was frustrated that he harbored doubts, believing his mother's words. By the way, we've decided to move in here. What? Amid my frustration with Steve, this unexpected statement came from my mother-in-law. To ensure this doesn't happen again in the future, we thought it's necessary to supervise. We've also started the process of selling the house. Moreover, we've changed the ownership of this condo into Dad's name. My mother-in-law continued with surprising comments before I could catch up. I was completely bewildered and looked at Steve for help. He avoided my gaze, clearly confused. What do you mean you've changed the ownership? That's not something simple, is it? Seemingly amused by my distress, my mother-in-law looked at me with a smile. The process wasn't that complicated. As if avoiding further explanation, she stood up and left for the living room where the TV was. At that point, I could only rely on Steve. Later, I took Steve to the bedroom to urge him to explain the situation, but he began to speak reluctantly. It turned out my in-laws had taken a liking to the high-rise condo on the day they visited and decided to move in immediately. Furthermore, considering that Steve's sister would be left with nothing, they preferred to invite her in as well rather than her having nothing. Steve, not fully understanding the details, had casually agreed and changed the ownership to his father's name during my absence. As a result of the change in ownership, we were faced with inheritance and gift taxes. However, my in-laws did not have the funds to pay these taxes, and we ended up having to use our savings to cover the cost. The savings were intended for my son Alex's future, considering the inevitable expenses that would arise. I couldn't help but feel a boiling rage towards my husband Steve and my in-laws for what they had done. However, dwelling on what had already happened was futile, so I had no choice but to accept it. The thought of parting ways with Steve crossed my mind with the resumption of living with my in-laws and sister-in-law, but considering Alex, I couldn't make a clear decision. We returned to the same life with my in-laws as before. Days of mental strain revisited me, but fortunately, work kept me busy enough not to dwell on it much. However, a significant event that would decide my feelings occurred. A month after my in-laws and sister-in-law started living with us, I was once again asked to participate in a meeting with that company. This time it was supposed to be short, requiring only an overnight stay. Despite hesitations due to the presence of my in-laws, it was still part of my work. In discussions with Steve, the initial accusations of infidelity raised by my mother-in-law were brought up, but after promising communication with the company, post-visit activities, and photo sharing, it was eventually agreed that I could go without any issues. So, I'll be leaving now. I greeted my mother-in-law, who was relaxing in the living room on the day of departure, but received no response. My father-in-law, watching TV, glanced at me for a moment but returned to his screen without showing much interest. Without saying anything more to them, I left the high-rise condo. After completing the meeting, I returned home the next afternoon. I'm back, I announced to my in-laws in the living room, then immediately headed to my office to resume work. However, the room was empty, with many of the materials that were supposed to be there gone. At first, I couldn't understand the situation and why everything had disappeared, but I quickly realized it was the work of my in-laws and confronted them. Mother, all the materials in my office are gone. Where did you put them? What are you making such a fuss about? She retorted when I hurried into the room, momentarily taken aback but then starting to sip her tea with an accustomed demeanor. Those books and documents, they were essential for my work. And that work? Filled with drawings that don't seem practical? Despite my earnest explanation, my mother-in-law laughed dismissively, unwilling to listen. Those were very important to me. Where did you put them? You're so noisy. We've already disposed of them, she said that while showing annoyance and eventually admitting to throwing them away. I was speechless at her words, finding myself unable to say anything more to her. Mia needs her own room. She can't always be with us. My mother-in-law explained that after moving, there wasn't enough room, so my sister-in-law had been sharing with my in-laws. However, exhausted by my sister-in-law's late-night activities, my in-laws decided without consulting me to give her my office, which stored materials and artwork crucial for my work. These were of immeasurable value to me. Hearing that my things were disposed of, I silently returned to my office from the living room. How much time had passed? While lying on the floor, devoid of motivation, Alex came into the room. "Mom, is something wrong?" Noticing Alex had come home and it was already dark outside, I responded, yeah, I'm fine. Welcome back." After he opened the door and saw the state of the office, he looked at me silently. "Did something happen?" While puzzled by his reaction, I asked with a smile, only for him to look back at me seriously. "Mom, aren't you going to divorce?" His unexpected question left me speechless. "I know. Grandma and Grandpa have been harsh on you, and Dad isn't supporting you, right?" Alex stood in front of me, turning on the light and sitting down on the floor. I couldn't grasp his words immediately, just staring back at him. "If things keep going like this, you'll get sick," he said before leaving the room. Immediately after, I received a summons from my mother-in-law and was ordered to start preparing dinner right away, so I quickly began the meal preparations. Even while cooking dinner, the words my son Alex had uttered were racing through my mind. I had been postponing the decision to divorce, considering my son, but never expected him to actually bring up the subject of divorce. The fact that my son made such a statement was a huge shock to me. However, that incident solidified my decision to divorce, and the next day, I promptly obtained a divorce form from the city hall. That evening, as soon as my husband Steve returned home, I presented the divorce form in front of my in-laws. "What's this?" Steve looked over the divorce form, not fully grasping its significance. "What's going on?" My mother-in-law approached to check the form immediately after. "Wait, what's this?" "A divorce form." Her seemingly pleased remark made it clear to Steve that I wanted a divorce, and he suddenly focused on me. "Let's get a divorce." Upon my declaration, Steve's complexion turned pale rapidly. "Why all of a sudden?" He slammed the table vehemently, pressing me for an answer. "Well, I think it's entirely reasonable. After all, you were a wife who couldn't show much skill in either household chores or your profession." My mother-in-law said that half-jokingly, pushing the conversation further towards me as my husband panicked. Caught off guard by her unexpected words, Steve paused and turned to look at my mother-in-law. "Perhaps if a wife in such a situation were to leave, you might find yourself free again," she suggested to Steve. "Honestly, you don't need a wife like her." My father-in-law also took the opportunity to express a similar sentiment to Steve. Faced with a series of comments from the family, Steve hesitated but ultimately seemed to agree and decided to sign the divorce form, handing it to me. "I sincerely thank you." I took the signed divorce form and went to my son Alex's room, expressing deep gratitude. Upon opening the room, Alex was immersed in studying or something else, concentrated at his desk. "Alex, we're going to be leaving this place," I softly said to his back, and he put down his pen and slowly turned towards me. "I understand." Alex responded quietly yet firmly, and then turned back to continue what he was doing. Receiving my son's understanding response, I gently closed the door and began preparing for what was to come in the house. I quickly arranged the moving preparations and submitted the divorce form at the city hall the following day. After Steve signed the divorce form, it took only about a week for me and my son to leave the house and take the first step towards starting a new life. Facing a new beginning, my son and I held hope for the future, determined to move forward while leaving the past behind. Since the new residence was already decided, I arranged for movers to transport our belongings, and during the process, I made one last visit to the living room to bid farewell to my in-laws. However, my in-laws ignored my presence, not giving me a second glance. "Thank you for everything," I said politely, but received no response from them. "I hope you continue to work hard on the payments," I added with a hint of sarcasm, which made my mother-in-law turn to me abruptly. "What do you mean by that?" she asked. "The monthly payments for the high-rise condo, $3,500. Good luck with that. You think you've won? It's clear that without our son, your lives won't be sustainable." My mother-in-law sneered. "No, we'll be fine," I calmly replied. My mother-in-law approached me with a displeased look. "What do you mean you'll be fine? Even now, you're putting on a brave face." She confronted me. "I'm just stating the facts. Actually, I have an income," I quietly counted. This was a fact unknown to my in-laws. At one time, Steve was very capable and earned more than me. However, due to the recent worsening economic situation and the loss of his position, Steve's income has significantly decreased. Now, Steve's salary is less than mine, and to be honest, his income alone is barely enough to make the payments for the high-rise condo's mortgage. Impossible. Are you insulting Steve? My mother-in-law angrily confronted me, her face showing her fury at my statement. I'm just stating the facts. If he has to pay a $3,500 mortgage, there's hardly anything left for other living expenses, I calmly replied. How have you been managing to live up to now then? My mother-in-law retorted. She had not been aware of the situation with my work and seemed to believe that I had no income of my own. So, she must have thought that the mortgage and daily living expenses were all being covered by Steve's earnings. As my mother-in-law began to show signs of confusion, I couldn't help but smile. Seeing this, she became even more infuriated. If you're going to live here, please make sure to pay the monthly mortgage of $3,500, I said calmly and thanked my father-in-law, who was sitting frozen on the sofa, before leaving the room. That night, as expected, I received a call from Steve. The subject of the call was indeed about the mortgage for the high-rise condo. It seemed Steve had not thought about the mortgage issue until he heard from my mother-in-law and hurriedly contacted me. Hey, what's this $3,500 about? He said over the phone. His confusion was evident through the phone. What do you mean? It has been like that since the time of purchase, I responded coolly. What, really? But there's no way we can afford that. Steve argued, probably not remembering the details. I'm no longer concerned with that matter. Goodbye, I said and promptly hung up the phone. Immediately after, I stopped accepting any calls from Steve or my in-laws. From that moment, I felt completely relieved, filled with a sense of serves them right towards them. Later, I learned from a colleague and friend of Steve's about what happened next. Steve ended up in deep debt due to failing to keep up with the loan payments and was eventually driven to bankruptcy. Naturally, my in-laws and sister-in-law didn't have the funds to make the payments either and also faced bankruptcy. Steve managed to keep his job but now has to support not only himself but also the other three, taking up night jobs and becoming increasingly worn out day by day. Moreover, Steve has reached the point of asking for financial assistance at work, completely ruining his credibility. Even former friends, including those from work, now avoid any association with him. There were even demands from Steve's parents for severance pay, indicating they were pushing him to quit his job, which only highlights the dire situation they're in. Perhaps this is their comeuppance for underestimating my profession and coveting the luxurious high-rise condo without knowing anything. Now, I live comfortably with my son, focused on my work, and feeling incredibly happy.